Since taking office, the Minister for Trade, Commerce and Industry, Richard Maru, has been focused on the O'Neill Dion government's emphasis to build a strong and robust economy on the basis of an economy that can sustain Papua New Guinea beyond the mineral boom. Minister Maru's approach to achieving this goal is by forging stronger ties with nations that have a sound potential for bilateral trade. Hello viewers, and welcome to another edition of Papua New Guinea's Look to India. Last week we spoke to the High Commissioner to India, Tasieri, trying to envisage where India stands in the world and how PNG can benefit from the world's fastest and largest growing economy. Well, Minister Maru takes our discussion into perspective from where we left off. But first, we need to find out, why India?
Welcome to the show, sir, and many congratulations for getting the responsibility of the trade, commerce and industry sector. First, soon after getting the responsibility, you went to New Zealand. Now your second trip is to India. Why India?
I've always said when I became the minister that India is a nation that has so much expertise, it's got good capital, has gone along a development path the same as Papua New Guinea. It's got a huge unemployment problem. It's also got a problem of helping the poor. And the challenges that India faces today are also the same challenges that Papua New Guinea faces. However, the scale we can't compare. It's so big for India. And I think Papua New Guinea has a lot to learn from India, and we can do with a lot of foreign direct investments out of India in order to help us continue our very strong economic growth we've enjoyed over the past 9 years, but also to learn from the strategies they're using to try and grow employment, skill their people, and also benefit from exchanges with India in trade, in commerce, and especially in education, and in some of the expertise they have, especially IT, medicine, and in agriculture as well. So I think India is a country that we should have done more with. We've had diplomatic relationships with India going back to the year 1996, when they opened up the office in Port Moresby. We started here in 2006. Between 2006 and now we've had no foreign direct investments from India, despite Indian companies investing all over the world, especially in countries like in the region of Africa.
So what was the key reason of you being here in India this time?
The key reason for me coming to India is to attend and speak as one of the key speakers at the India International the Partnership Summit hosted by the government of UP, the India Confederation of Industry and the Indian government.
So work plan for 2013 states that signing off a trade policy and double tax treaty with India. What steps are you going to take for that while your visit to India? Last year
I had the opportunity, I guess the first time, being able to sell Papua New Guinea and tell Indian businesses and Indian industry that Papua New Guinea is an investment destination for many big companies of the world. I'm talking ExxonMobil, I'm talking Shell, I'm talking other big companies are all now rushing to PNG because we are very rich with resources. And it amazes me that Indian companies have not even looked at investing in our resource industries and also in our agriculture industry and fishing industry. We have a need to have a rice industry, for example, where we are currently importing all our rice despite our very fertile land and plains. We need Indian expertise and capital to help us start up a rice industry. We also have a need to start a cement industry using limestone. We know Indians are very good at the industry. We need Indian expertise to go and help us start up an industry instead of importing all our concrete from overseas as we're doing today. We also have a need to start up a dairy industry. Despite our relationship with Australia and New Zealand, they continue to want to only export dairy goods into Papua New Guinea, but are not even willing to come and help us start up our own industry. So you can quite clearly see Papua New Guinea needs to move away from its traditional partners in a lot of the industries, and look at new partners like India who can help us replace a lot of the imports if we are going to grow the economy and become a strong and robust industry. My first move is to meet with the foreign ministry in Delhi today, and also to meet with the trade, commerce and textile industry minister today, and to invite them to come to Papua New Guinea with the trade delegation from India, with the hope that when they come over we can sign a double tax treaty, trade protection agreement with India and other bilateral agreements with India, so we can really now build the bridge and start the relationship going in terms of business, commerce between India and Papua New Guinea.
The cost of doing business in Papua New Guinea is quite daunting. Now, how does the government plans to address this issue? We'll find out on the other side of the break. The cost of doing business in Papua New Guinea is ranked the highest in the world by industries already operating here. This will be an obstacle to the government's plan to build a strong economic base by forging firm bilateral trade arrangements with nations such as New Zealand and India, where talks have already begun. So how does the government plans to achieve this? Let's find out.
So many congratulations on the announcement you made for the work plan for 2013 and the transparency you have demonstrated in the plan. You have also mentioned the development of national strategy for improving the business climate in PNG while bringing down the cost of doing business there. What are the actual plan? How do you propose to do that? Can you please elaborate on it?
Well, basically, industry in Papua New Guinea has been complaining time and again to successive governments since independence that the cost of doing business in Papua New Guinea is among the highest in the world. We have the highest cost of power. For example, recently I just came back from China. I found out that the Chinese industry pays, their cost of power is 6 times less than Papua New Guinea. Our cost of freight is among the highest. Our airfares is among the highest in the world. Our cost of power, our cost of utilities, basically all the inputs to produce any product in Papua New Guinea is among the highest in the world. And successive governments have not heard the cries of industry and have not done anything to try and reduce the cost of doing business in Papua New Guinea. And the O'Neill Dion government is very serious about building a strong and robust economy on the basis of an economy that can sustain Papua New Guinea beyond the mineral boom. And the first way to do that is to drive the cost of doing business down so that Papua New Guinea goods and services can compete on a global scale. We have to understand the rest of the world is moving towards an open and free economy. And if PNG is going to now sign agreements and be part of regional trading blocks where you have free trade areas under various bodies that we are members of, like APEC, we are also an observer at ASEAN, we're going to have to open up our country for other goods to flow freely without imposition of tariff. To do that, Papua New Guinean companies must compete, industries must compete, and they will never do that. And if we are not careful, we will lose our entire private sector. We will lose our manufacturing industry. Our cost of producing anything, be it chicken, Coca-Cola, or whatever, will be much, much higher than imported goods. And we'll end up being a country that is wholly dependent on imports, and that's very dangerous. So my plan is to bring together the private sector and government and sit down and map out a way to drive costs down per sector. For example, how do we drive down the cost of airfares in Papua New Guinea? The answer is simple. We've got to open the airways and bring more low-cost airlines into Papua New Guinea. That's one sector we need to look at. How do we drive down the cost of power? We need to bring in many, many private power stations. And one of the reasons why I'm in India today is to invite Indian companies to come and build power stations so they can produce power at much lower cost than PNG Power is currently charging industry at 74 toya per megawatt hour, when the Chinese are paying like something like 10 toya. We need investors to build power stations at a cost of 200 million, 300 million, which we currently don't have that sort of money. PNG Power doesn't have that sort of money. We need the investors to come and build private power stations so we can start to reduce the cost of power to industry. So we must sit down with the private sector and go sector by sector and develop strategies on how we can reduce the cost of energy, utilities, cost of airfares, cost of freight, and together with the private sector, the government needs to now come up with new policies to help drive down all the costs so that one day Papua New Guinea will have an economy that's strong, that's robust, and that can compete internationally. So when we open up our markets for the free flow of goods and services right across our region in Asia and the Pacific, our goods are able to trade internationally, so we can continue to have an industry that will sustain employment. I'll give you an example. The chicken industry alone in Papua New Guinea employs over 2,000 men and women. Currently, Australian imports are far cheaper than what we can produce our chicken for. If we keep importing Australian chicken, the whole industry will close because it's no longer sustainable to have a chicken industry, and you lose 2,000 jobs, and there are 10 families who depend on the 2,000 employed. You're going to affect 10,000 people. What are you going to do there? Who's going to pay for their school fees? Who's going to sustain their families? So it's very dangerous if the government continues not to hear the plight of industry and take measures and develop strategies, implement new strategies to help drive down the cost of doing business. Recently, when I was in China, I learned even Chinese companies are now moving to Vietnam. They are now moving to Laos because the cost of labor is far cheaper and it costs less to produce in those countries. American companies are now taking production back to America because they're now discovering it'll cost less than producing in China. So people are always moving to low-cost countries. PNG has to be a low-cost producer. Otherwise, we'll never compete. We will not have a manufacturing sector. We'll not have a middle class, and we're going to have serious unemployment problems on the back of the vast unemployment we already have.
Do stay with us. There's more on PNG India Trade Talks. If you've just joined us, you're watching Business PNG, and we're talking to the Minister for Trade, Commerce and Industry, Richard Maru. Papua New Guinea is keen on forging bilateral trade agreements with nations built on good national concept policies. Well, Minister Maru thinks India is one such nation with so much expertise and a good capital base. So much we can learn from.
So what are the other regions you are going to research for the good national content policy?
I'm really interested in what India is doing to try and address the unemployment problems it has and how it wants to create 10 million jobs a year. We have an unemployment of only 2 million. We need to find employment for them. India is a far bigger problem, and I'm interested and we'll be working closely with India to see the strategies they will pursue and how we can ride on the back of the strategies they're pursuing to grow employment. Now, in terms of national content, I've already announced I'll be going to all the major mines to have a look at their national content policy, how they're implementing it, in particular what obligations they have to the state and to our people as per the project agreements they signed with the state, and to see whether they're actually meeting the obligations under the national content plan. For example, I want to know if they have been giving contracts to Papua New Guinea companies under the national content plan. I want to know what goods and services they are now currently buying from Papua New Guinean companies in areas like food, or are they importing everything? I want to know what they are doing to help locals within the mining areas to enter into business arrangements with these mining companies. I really want to see how they are helping to benefit the local people and the communities and the obligations they've got under the project agreements they've signed with the state.
Can you please explain it to the viewers the Indigenous Wealth Creation Act you are proposing?
The act I'm proposing will basically, the aim of the act is to give priority to Papua New Guineans to own and manage businesses and benefit from the wealth of our nation. When you look around today, 10% of business in Papua New Guinea is owned and controlled by Papua New Guineans and 90% by outsiders. Now, the government has a responsibility to first act for its own people, and we must now assist and empower our citizens to take back the economy, take ownership and take control of the economy. And one of the things the Act will do is to identify what businesses can only be run by Papua New Guineans. For example, trade stores, kai houses, those shouldn't be run by any foreigners. Those should be given back to 100% Papua New Guineans only. We also have to look at what businesses should be run as joint ventures. What businesses foreigners cannot invest in. So Papua New Guineans can be empowered and supported through the bank and through training to take back those businesses and benefit from the wealth that flows through the economy, through our resources and the wealth of the nation. If we don't do that, Papua New Guineans will continue to be marginalized in our own country. That is totally unacceptable, because one day there will be a major uprising of our people, and that will cause major problems for our country. We have a vision that clearly says we have to be a healthy, a wise, and a country that is going to be fair and equitable. And when you look at it today, that is not the case. We have only a very rich, a very small class of people with a lot of the wealth. We have a growing middle class, but 80% of our people continue to live in our villages, causing a lot of social problems, law and order problems. We've got to find employment for them. We've got to create opportunities for them. Otherwise, Papua New Guinea will continue to be a society that will be lawless, and that will have a lot of problems, especially when you have people feeling that they haven't been given a fair go in their own country.
And what will be the biggest change in IPA for efficient working?
I think the time has come for government to recognize that institutions like IPA have a very, very important role to play in commerce and in industry in helping to grow the economy. And if we are going to keep good people in IPA who are going to go out to the world and canvass trade and business, we've got to pay the right conditions, salaries and wages to keep the best people who are being lured by the private sector. And the biggest change I want to see in IPA is for them to look at increasing all their fees and become corporatized so that they are no longer part of the public service, and they should offer far better benefits to keep good staff, their management and good staff within IPA, because their very fundamental role is to facilitate business in Papua New Guinea. Without a strong economy that's growing, we will never create employment. We will not have money to pay for free school fees. The economy must grow. It must be strong. And IPA has a very key role in facilitating business so we can have more investment and more growth in the economy. We can't talk about inclusive growth without a strong investment promotion authority that has a very, very key role. We are losing many, many good staff from there, and it's very difficult for Papua New Guinea to go out to the world and market ourselves when we don't have staff, when we don't have financial resources. You only have to look at India. We've had an office here since 2006. What has IPA done to try and come and lure Indian investment? We've only had our first trade fair here last year. So we need to empower IPA, we need to resource it, and we need to pay for good people to be employed by IPA to go all over the world and canvass investment and bring investors into PNG, and also look for markets for our goods and our services to reach the globe as well. So my first biggest change is to corporatize IPA so it's no longer part of the public service, and we can reward the current employees properly, and we can hire high caliber employees because we can afford to pay for them outside of the current public service structure.
And how would you propose to help NISIT to work towards its goals in PNG?
First thing I want to do is to come up with a new legislation for NISIT that allows NISIT to have teeth. NISIT is there as a body to regulate industrial standards, including manufacturing standards. Unfortunately, the law doesn't allow it to hold industry responsible. For example, if you want to bring a new imported item into PNG, you must first go to NISIT and get the approval. If you don't, you should be fined in a court of law. we need to make sure NISIT has a law that gives it teeth to act when they are offenders. The other aspect I want to see in NISIT is for NISIT to do more promotion and PR work so industry understands the role of NISIT. Right now, if you ask people on the street, who is NISIT, nobody knows. It needs to tell the country what its role and its function is, and it has to have a new enabling legislation that will allow it to have teeth so it can perform its functions.
An insight into the Small Business Development Corporation and small to medium enterprises when we come back. The Small Business Development Corporation is an important component in the development of small to medium enterprises. However, Minister Maru says apart from the need to properly define and distinguish small to medium enterprises, having an updated database to come up with a master plan remains a challenge for the government.
SBDC is a very important component in SME development. How would you propose that it would work more efficiently towards its goals?
I think the first thing we need to do in SBDC is to come up with a new SME definition for Papua New Guinea. Right now, if you ask even myself as minister and everyone, what is Papua New Guinea's definition of the small and medium enterprise sector, nobody will tell you the answer. We need to know who is the small industry sector, who makes up the medium-sized enterprises, who are the small, who are the micro. Unless we do that, we cannot decide on government strategies to intervene in each of the sectors. Right now, we don't even know the numbers in the sectors, so that the government can look at intervention programs to address growing each of the sectors. So without the definition of the SME sector, it is very difficult for us to come up with a master plan and look at government intervention to help grow the sector. Countries all over the world, 90% of employment is created in the SME sector. We recognize that also in Papua New Guinea. But before we can start looking at intervention strategies as government, we first have to define what is SME in Papua New Guinea, and then come up with the policies that will underpin the growth of the sector.
And what reforms would you bring to the cooperative societies in PNG?
My own views as minister since coming in, my own views are that I think the trust under the former government is wrong. We've gone around telling everyone, just start up a cooperative society and all of a sudden you'll get some money from the government and that's all. And everybody's been waiting for a handout. I think that's wrong. Cooperative society should be a way of mobilizing farmers in a region or an area where there's a market opportunity so they can come together and pool resources, organize themselves to produce and market a product so they can benefit from a market opportunity. It's not a small organization for people to get free handouts from the government. So my view is let's look at province-wide cooperative societies in industries that makes commercial sense to have a cooperative society under a society model or even under a company model, but members are mobilized from the farmer groups.
So what are the thoughts on the development of SME policies in PNG?
My thoughts are, firstly, we need to have a workshop, bring together players in the sector and experts to come up with a definition for the SME sector in Papua New Guinea, and then look at a master plan and also a new act, legislation for the Small Business Development Corporation, which is the entity tasked to formulate the policy and also to implement government policies towards the growth of the sector. Without growing the sector, we'll never grow employment. So we need to really understand how big the sector is, where it is today, and how we want to move and grow the sector in future.
Thank you, Minister, for being with us, for giving your valuable time to us and answering all our questions. So this was Honorable Richard Maru, Minister of Trade, Commerce and Industry of PNG.
And that has been our edition of Business PNG. For comments and suggestions, send them through to businesspng@mtv.com.pg. Our programs can also be accessed online. Just log on to www.mtv.com.pg business.com.pg and go to our Business PNG page. And before we go, do join us next Tuesday for more insight into PNG India trade talks. This time with the Investment Promotion Authority's Managing Director, Ivan Pomaleo. See you then.